In the early morning hours of June 22, 2025, the skies over Iran were lit up by a major military assault. The United States and Israel launched a series of coordinated strikes against key parts of Iran's nuclear program. This operation, which was a significant escalation in a long-running standoff, involved a large number of aircraft and advanced missiles. The attacks targeted several important locations across Iran. The primary goal, as stated by the attacking nations, was to stop Iran from being able to develop nuclear weapons. This bold and dangerous move has now put the entire Middle East region on high alert for what might come next. The operation was a joint effort, with the United States leading a major part of the air campaign. U.S. forces, operating under the codename Operation Midnight Hammer, used some of their most powerful military technology. More than 125 aircraft, including stealthy B-2 bombers, were reportedly involved in the mission. These planes dropped massive bombs designed to destroy targets buried deep underground. At the same time, Israel conducted its own separate strikes. This coordinated action shows a very strong alliance between the two countries in their shared goal of preventing a nuclear-armed Iran, a development they view as an unacceptable threat. The main targets of this large-scale operation were three of Iran's most critical nuclear facilities. These were the sites at Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, all of which are central to Iran's nuclear activities. The Fordow facility in particular is built deep inside a mountain to protect it from attack. The United States used special bunker buster bombs, weighing 30,000 pounds each, in an attempt to destroy it. In addition to these primary nuclear sites, Israeli forces also targeted other Iranian military locations in Bushehr, Yazd, and Avaz, broadening the scope of the conflict beyond just the nuclear program. This latest round of attacks did not happen without warning. Tensions had been rising for weeks. Just over a week earlier, on June 13th, Israel had carried out its own surprise attack on Iran. This initial strike set the stage for a much larger conflict. Iran responded to that first attack with missile launches toward Israel. The situation quickly spiraled, leading to the massive joint operation we saw this weekend. The world is now watching anxiously as these events unfold, with many fearing that this is only the beginning of a much larger and more destructive regional war. The decision by the United States and Israel to launch these strikes stems from years of deep concern and failed diplomacy. For a long time, both nations have accused Iran of secretly trying to build nuclear weapons. Despite Iran's claims that its program is for peaceful energy purposes, the international agreement intended to limit Iran's nuclear activities had unraveled, and recent intelligence reports suggested that Iran was getting very close to having enough enriched uranium for a bomb. This created a sense of urgency in Washington and Tel Aviv, leading them to believe that military action was the only option left to prevent what they call a nightmare scenario. American officials, including President Donald Trump, have been very clear about their objectives. They have stated that the primary goal of Operation Midnight Hammer was not to overthrow the Iranian government, but to neutralize its nuclear capabilities. The administration has pointed to what it calls Iran's history of aggressive behavior in the region, and its support for proxy groups as reasons why it cannot be trusted with nuclear weapons. Vice President J.D. Vance and other senior officials have reinforced this message, arguing that a nuclear-armed Iran would destabilize the entire Middle East and pose a direct threat to American allies and interests. Israel shares this perspective, but perhaps with an even greater sense of immediate danger. Israeli leaders have long described a nuclear Iran as an existential threat to their country's survival. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu praised the joint operation as a historic and necessary action to protect Israel. Given Iran's frequent hostile rhetoric towards Israel, the possibility of its biggest enemy obtaining the ultimate weapon was seen as an intolerable risk. This fear has driven Israeli policy for many years and was a key factor in the decision to join forces with the United States for this high-stakes military operation. The timing of the strikes is also linked to the perceived failure of other options. Years of economic sanctions had hurt Iran's economy, but had not stopped its nuclear progress. Diplomatic efforts to revive the old nuclear deal had stalled, with both sides refusing to compromise on key demands. From the perspective of the US and Israel, the window of opportunity to act was closing fast. They believed that if they waited any longer, Iran's program would become unstoppable. This belief that all other paths had been exhausted pushed them to take the dramatic and risky step of direct military intervention. The immediate results of the strikes are a mix of bold claims and defiant denials. The United States has declared the mission a complete success. President Trump stated that the targeted nuclear sites were completely and totally obliterated. Satellite images seem to support some of these claims, showing large craters at the heavily fortified Fordow facility. However, Iran has presented a very different story. Iranian officials insist that the damage was minimal and mainly limited to surface structures. They also claim, without independent verification, that they had already moved most of their sensitive nuclear material from the targeted sites before the attack even happened. The human cost of this escalating conflict is tragically clear and continues to grow. Since the initial Israeli strikes began on June 13, Iranian authorities report that over 430 people, most of them civilians, have been killed in Iran. One recent strike on a military base in Yazd province killed 9 Iranian security personnel. In Israel, the situation is also dire. Retaliatory missile attacks from Iran have killed at least 24 people and injured more than 1,200 over the past 10 days. A recent barrage of 40 missiles aimed at Tel Aviv caused significant damage and wounded many more, bringing the reality of war home to Israeli citizens. In response to the joint U.S.-Israeli assault, Iran has reacted with strong condemnation and threats of severe retaliation. The government in Tehran called the strikes a clear violation of international law and vowed that its nuclear program will continue. A spokesperson for Iran's powerful Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps warned that the U.S. would deeply regret its actions. True to its word, Iran quickly launched another wave of missile strikes against Israel. Furthermore, Iran's foreign minister has stated that there will be no return to diplomatic talks until after Iran has taken its revenge for the attack. The Iranian government is also considering actions that could have a major impact on the global economy. The country's parliament has given initial approval to a measure that would close the Strait of Hormuz. This narrow waterway is a critical choke point for a large portion of the world's oil supply. If Iran goes through with this threat, it could cause oil prices to skyrocket and create economic chaos around the world. This defiant posture shows that Iran is not backing down. Instead, it is signaling that it is prepared to escalate the conflict in ways that will be felt far beyond the Middle East. The international community has responded to the strikes with deep division and widespread alarm. The United Nations Secretary General made an urgent plea for all sides to stop the fighting and de-escalate immediately. However, global powers are split. Russia and China, 2 of Iran's key allies, strongly condemned the U.S. and Israeli attacks, calling them an illegal act of aggression. Turkey also joined in the condemnation. In contrast, major European countries like Germany, France, and the United Kingdom, while not supporting the strikes, have focused on urging Iran to avoid retaliation and return to the negotiating table to discuss its nuclear program. Inside the United States, the military action has ignited a fierce political debate. While many support the president's decision, some members of Congress are questioning its legality. They argue that launching such a major attack without congressional approval is unconstitutional. The strikes have also raised security concerns at home. The Department of Homeland Security has issued a bulletin warning about a heightened threat environment. This includes the risk of cyber attacks from Iran or violent acts carried out by individuals sympathetic to its cause. U.S. embassies in the Middle East have increased security, with some even reducing staff out of fear of retaliation. The most serious danger now is that these strikes could trigger a much broader war across the entire Middle East. Analysts are warning that the situation is extremely volatile. If Iran decides to retaliate forcefully against U.S. troops or allies in the region, the conflict could quickly spiral out of control. Furthermore, if Iran follows through on its threats to withdraw from the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, it could spark a dangerous arms race. Countries like Saudi Arabia, Iran's main regional rival, might feel they have no choice but to pursue their own nuclear weapons to protect themselves. These events matter deeply because they have pushed a tense situation to the brink of a major regional conflict with global consequences. The world is now holding its breath, hoping that diplomacy can find a way to pull the region back from the edge. The immediate future depends on the choices that will be made in Washington, Tehran, and Tel Aviv. The decisions taken in the coming days will determine whether this crisis can be contained or if it will explode into a devastating war that would affect the security and economy of the entire world. impacting the lives of millions of people far from the battlefield.